Hello and welcome to ATP Report. I'm Barry Nussbaum. We have a terrific special guest with us today. She is the friend of the American Truth Project Special Report Group. Clare Lopez is a renowned scholar in terms of American foreign and domestic policy with a 20-year career at the CIA and then a bunch of years with the State Department. If there's anything we need to know about American policy, foreign or domestic, it's Clare Lopez. Welcome back, Clare.
Thank you, Barry. Always glad to be back with you.
I was reading some articles that you've written over the past, and you've been teaching me for a number of years that the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, their international terror operation group, has never been blamed for 9/11, even though you've done research saying that they were involved. And they've been protected ever since by basically every administration, even to the point now where the Biden administration is floating talking points that they are about to remove the IRGC from the U.S. terror watch list, which is disgusting. And I might add, absolutely the opposite of what that list is supposed to be for. If you can't put the leading terror organization on the terror list, the list means nothing. Why has not a single president assigned them responsibility for what they did on 9/11?
You know, I just don't know. I have to say, I was an expert witness in the Havlish case, which was an investigation into the 9/11 attacks. This ran through the 2000s, concluded in 2011. It was a legal case before a court. Judge George Daniels of the Southern District of New York, Federal District Court, presided. And in that late December 2011 ruling from the bench, Judge Daniels ruled that Iran was co-responsible, along with Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda, for the attacks of 9/11. And the forward operating arm of the number one terror sponsoring state in the world, according to the U.S. Department of State, remains Iran, and its projection of terror around the region and the world is carried out by the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and its subsidiary unit, the Quds Force. But no one at the senior levels of U.S. national security has ever so much as mentioned or held to account Iran or the IRGC. And now, as you say, perhaps thinking about taking them off the foreign terrorist organizations list. Insanity.
It's nuts to me. You know, when Trump came out and quite accurately painted Iran as the problem in the world, there was tremendous pushback because, God forbid, he pulled us out of the Iran nuclear deal that everybody knows was working so terrifically. Not. Meanwhile, Iran is building terror outfits all over the world. They're sponsoring weapons traveling all over the world. They've got groups undermining governments all over the world. They've gotten worse and worse and worse since Biden took office, and he's going to reward them with basically favored nation status by taking them off the bad guy list. It's crazy, Clare. Speaking about terror, terror is exploding in Israel, both in the territories and inside Israel proper. The world press repeatedly characterizes both sides as equally culpable. In other words, a terrorist gets on a bus and starts shooting people. One of the passengers kills the guy, and it says Israelis and Palestinians die in bus shooting as if it's some sort of, well, crime and not terror. What can be done to have more accurate reporting of the truth on the ground in Israel?
Well, I don't know that we can affect the mainstream media, but you're absolutely right. There is no moral equivalence between the Jewish state of Israel and the way that it has to defend itself, and its people have to defend themselves, and the number one foremost state sponsor of terrorism in the world, the regime in Tehran. And as you say, Barry, just over the last couple of weeks, that would be the last couple of weeks here in of March, 2022, we're now into April, there have been a number of deadly terror attacks, Islamic terror attacks against Israeli civilians inside of Israel, a couple of them perpetrated by Arab Israelis, and one crossed over from Jenin in northern Samaria. And that is just before, that happened all just before Ramadan began, just over this past weekend. Ramadan traditionally is a period of time, yes, for prayer and fasting, pillar of Islam for Muslims, but it is also traditionally, and has been for a very long time, a period of Islamic terror attacks. What do we have to look forward to, I think, is the worrisome question.
Well, it's not just Israel. The war crimes in Ukraine are just horrific. And the evidence of continuous war crimes being committed by the Russians against civilians in the Ukraine is unparalleled in, well, modern European history, at least since World War II. Do you agree, Claire, that there's adequate evidence to charge the Russians? And if so, what will be the outcome of the investigation and the hearings?
Yes, from the videos and horrific photos that are coming out of places in and around the capital city of Kiev, for example, Bucha, a suburb of Kiev, there is no doubt that Russian troops are committing atrocities. These are war crimes. The main thing is that these are captured on photos and videos, and cases, or a case, I guess, has already been brought before the International Court, Criminal Court at The Hague in the Netherlands. That will take some time, but the evidence is clearly building. The photos are horrific of civilian bodies, hands tied behind their backs, shot through the head. They're horrific. But here's something else. The Ukrainians are pretty good at collecting the evidence, not just the videos and the photos, but for whatever reason, Russian troops were permitted to come into Ukraine, the invading force, with their cell phones. Well, the Ukrainians collected all of that, and they've got the names and the addresses and presumably the units to which those individual troops belong. They're collecting all of that information. It'll take a while, but the evidence for war crimes on the part of the Russian army is overwhelming and horrific.
You know, Russian losses of men and material is widely different than what the United States predicted. General Milley originally predicted Russia would crush Ukraine in a week, and literally it would become a satellite of the Russian government in Moscow. Now that Ukraine has fought back ferociously, and Russian losses are dramatic and growing, both in men and material, Russia is literally withdrawing from certain parts of the Ukraine that they had conquered and have now been liberated. And Milley now comes out with a statement that the war is going to take a year or more. He went from 1 week to more than a year. What do you see, Claire, as the short-term and long-term outcome to the conflict?
Well, I'm always cautious about the numbers that are coming out from any side of this conflict, be it the Ukrainians, the Russians, or our own Defense Department. I'm not sure we can rely on such numbers. Nevertheless, it is clear that the Russians have been stopped from a conquest of the capital city of Kiev, and they are withdrawing troops and whatever materiel is left to them from that area. The thing is that they are backing up to the eastern part of Ukraine called the Donbass, where there are two oblasts, or kind of provinces or states, if you will, Donetsk and Luhansk. And they also pose a continuing very serious threat, the Russians do, in the southern part of Ukraine, along the Sea of Azov, where they would like to take a strip of land that would then geographically connect Russia to Crimea, which are not connected geographically right now. The Russians also would like to have success in taking the objective of the city of Odessa, which is on the Black Sea, the other side of the Kerch Strait that links the Black Sea to the Sea of Azov. That is a serious threat, and why the Ukrainian leadership, President Volodymyr Zelensky and others, are pleading for more heavy weapons, missiles, for example, shore-to-ship missiles that perhaps could help fend off an amphibious landing in that southern area, as well as the Stingers, the drones, the javelins that already have been so effective. But the statement from General Milley gives me pause, and here's why. Instead of saying, you know, the Russians are on their back foot, the Ukrainians have put up an incredibly courageous and effective fight against that invasion. Let's press the advantage now. Let's press the Russians. Let's push them out of all of Ukraine's sovereign territory, which is what President Zelensky is saying. Instead of saying that, it sounds like the Pentagon, maybe the US leadership, doesn't really want Putin and the Russians to completely lose. And that troubles me. Instead of saying, let's push until they are completely defeated and ousted from the sovereign territory of Ukraine, we're getting comments like you just mentioned, Barry, that, oh, this may drag on for a long time. Well, it wouldn't drag on for a long time if we gave Ukraine everything and more of the weapons that they're requesting, even including those MiGs that Poland wants to give them, the MiG-29s.
You know, you just raised a point I've never thought about, and maybe you're right. It seems logically where a sovereign nation that is on Team America gets invaded and their people are being slaughtered and their cities are being decimated. I mean, they're leveling apartment buildings and factories and schools and hospitals. The infrastructure of the Ukraine looks like something after World War II. It's so destroyed in some places that we ought to be sending them everything they want. And if we don't want to put American boots on the ground, we can sure supply them with enough missiles that are portable that would take down every ship, helicopter, airplane, tank, and armored personnel carrier with one guy and a loader behind him loading that weapon. And we could literally turn the tide very, very quickly. And yet we don't seem to want to. And it may be that you're right for some bizarre reason that for the life of me, I can't figure out why we would be even 1 or 2% on the bench for Putin.
You know, it seems as trying to answer, you know, that question, that the United States, not necessarily the rest of NATO or Eastern European members of NATO, but the United States is somehow cowed, deterred by Putin's bluster and bluff and threats to use nuclear weapons, or implied threats anyway, that we're the ones who've been deterred. And I don't understand that, because combined forces between the United States and our other NATO allies would absolutely tilt the balance of this fight for Ukraine.
No question.
I don't know about very quickly, but it would do it. Why don't we do that?
That was my question to you, and I don't know either. But it sure makes sense that we ought to. It wouldn't cost a lot of money. I mean, we spend more than that on bridges to nowhere. Claire, how can people find out about you and get your content on a regular basis?
Well, certainly right here at American Truth Project. I also post interviews and my op-eds and videos at the Center, the Citizens Commission on National Security, also at the United West. I just have restarted contributing to my Newsmax blog, In Defense of Liberty. You can find me there. I am also a senior advisory board member of Sarja Sangari's Near East Center for Strategic Engagement. I am on the United West if I didn't mention them, and I'm also on social media at Clare M. Lopez on Twitter, my name at Facebook, and Lopez Liberty at Telegram.
Everybody got notes? Claire's everywhere, in case you didn't notice. Follow her. You'll learn stuff you really need to know, and we're big fans. Thanks for coming on with me today, Claire. Sure appreciate your insight.
Thank
as
you.
I'm sure our viewers do as well. And to you out there in ATP land, we sure appreciate you coming on with us today. We appreciate your support and hope to see you again soon. For ATP Report, I'm Barry Nussbaum.